Hello gamers, and welcome. Final Fantasy XV is not far off. Not very far off at all. So, in celebration of that, I thought I would give you all a look at Final Fantasy XIV. Final Fantasy XIV is the second of Square Enix's Final Fantasy-based MMORPGs. The previous was Final Fantasy XI, and it was a humongous success for Square Enix. It was available for PC and PlayStation 2, and it will soon be available on mobile. The game is in end of life, and it won't be getting any new expansions. It's got a lot of content, an enormous amount of content, and so anyone who's wanting to get into that, be warned that it is a very old school, hardcore MMORPG. By contrast, Final Fantasy XIV is vastly different and not quite as hardcore. Now, anyone who knows anything about Final Fantasy XIV knows that the original version of the game was a complete and total failure. Final Fantasy XIV basically flopped. It was bad. I'm not going to go into all the details of how bad it was, but let's just say if all the worst things possible could happen, they happened with that game. So the developers essentially went to the community, and said to them, "Alright, what do you want us to do? Fix the mess, or rebuild the game from scratch?" Well, the gaming community basically said, rebuild the game from scratch, and that's exactly what they did. And instead of just ignoring the existence of the original game, Square Enix did something brilliant. They basically rolled the failure of the original game into the storyline of Final Fantasy XIV: A Realm Reborn. At the end of the original game, the very last thing the player saw was a cutscene of a massive battle and the red moon of Dalamud being brought down over Eorzea as part of Garlemald's meteor program. But what not everyone knew is that the moon was a prison for Bahamut, the Elder Primal. And above Cardinal Flats, above the battle between the Eorzean Alliance and the armies of Garlemald, Dalamud broke up, Bahamut was released, and he laid waste to Eorzea. Final Fantasy XIV: A Realm Reborn is set 5 years later. The nation-states of Eorzea are working to rebuild. Things have been messed up. There is signs left behind of the battle and the destruction caused by Bahamut. No one knows where he went, and the calamity that he caused has changed a lot of things in the world. Now, there are various classes that you can play in the game starting out, and those classes at level 30 become jobs. Now, Square Enix is getting away from classes. They aren't getting rid of them, but they will not be introducing any new classes. The classes that exist in the game are those that are going to always be in the game, and there won't be any new ones. But they will add new jobs. Those jobs are always accessible at level 30. You can you can do the quests to unlock them at that level. So, let's go through basically what's available class-wise for you. And to do that, we have to go and take a look at each of the different city-states. And let us begin the Jewel of the Desert, Udal. Udal is a prosperous nation. They are extremely wealthy and powerful. They were built by the Lalafell, a diminutive race of people. But despite its wealth, this nation has its issues. Mainly the vast disparity between the haves and have-nots. Also, Garlemald conquered the nation of Alamiga, and refugees have begun spilling into Odal. The rich and powerful members of Odal, who are part of the group called Syndicate, do not want them here. They are very unwelcome. And now the monarch of Udal wants to help them, but she's got resistance, massive amounts of resistance from the Syndicate. And so that's causing a lot of political problems for her and for the entire nation. And you enter as an adventurer, and you have various options available to you class-wise. Now, you can choose to go the safe route and become a tank. In that case, you would choose the Gladiator. Gladiator is a sword and shield wielder, which at level 30 can become the Paladin. Or you can choose to get up close and personal and duke it out with your enemies hand to hand as the Pugilist. Pugilist becomes the all-important monk from Final Fantasy lore. And then there is the Thaumaturge. The Thaumaturge is a ranged magic dealing DPS. It can burn down their enemies with fire or freeze them with ice. They become the Black Mage, the quintessential damage dealing ranged magic user that is famous in the Final Fantasy series. Now, let us take a look at Gridania. A beautiful and prosperous nation, Gridania is nestled within the Twelves Wood. And they exist here under the watchful gaze of the elementals. Originally, the ancestors of the Gridanians were not allowed to live on the surface. They were forced to live underground. The elementals didn't want them here. That was until an intercessor race was created by the elementals themselves. And working with the people that lived underground, the Pajali helped to establish Gridania as a nation. Now, in order to stay here within the Twelves Wood, Gridania has to follow the rules set by the elementals. If they violate those rules, then the green wrath comes. And when that happens, no force on Earth will stop the destruction of Gridania. If you choose to make Gridania your home, and starting city, there are various classes that you can become. And you start your career in the game. You can choose to be a Lancer. Lancers are polearm wielding close range physical DPS, which at level 30 become the ever popular Dragoon, known for their leap attacks. You can also become an Archer, which is a long range DPS using bows. At level 30, the Archer becomes the Bard. Bard has the interesting distinction of being able to use songs to help out party members. And you can also be a conjurer. Conjurer is the strongest healer class in the game. And at level 30, you can unlock White Mage, which is one of the most iconic classes in Final Fantasy lore, and the most powerful healing class in the game. Gridania is also a nation that's not without its other issues. The Elizans, which are the elves of Final Fantasy XIV lore, live alongside the Mikote, who are a cat-like race. And there are racism issues among these. It's a complex problem for Gridania. Let's look at the third and final major city-state of Eorzea, Limsa-Lominsa. Limsa-Lominsa is built on an island. The city-state was established originally by pirates. When Garlemald's meteor project threatened Eorzea, they had to change that. And they decided to become a respectable nation. That didn't sit well with a lot of pirates who didn't want to give up their pirating ways. Namely, one of the rules being never to attack ships belonging to other members of the Eorzean Alliance. Only attack ships belonging to Garlemald. And so there are those problems. If you choose to make Limsa-Lominsa your home, your starting nation, you have a few choices. Now, you can choose to be a Marauder, a great axe wielding tank class, which at level 30 becomes the warrior job. Or you can choose to go Rogue. Rogue is a class that was added with the Heavensward expansion. Rogues are sort of the secret police of Gridania. They're the ones that uphold the code to make sure that pirates don't cross the line, that they stay within the rules. You can then, at level 30, unlock Ninja, a new job that was introduced that was brought in again by the Heavensward expansion. And then the last class in Limsa-Lominsa is the most interesting and most complex, and that is the Arcanist. Arcanist is a pet-based ranged DPS, magic-based DPS, where you use a magical creature called Carbuncle to fight by your side to basically burn your enemies to the ground. Now, this is the only class that branches off into two different jobs, and you can choose to be one or the other, or you can do both if you wish. This is Summoner and Scholar. A Summoner no longer uses carbuncles. A Summoner will summon smaller, lesser versions of the primals, being Ifrit, Titan, and Garuda. And you can use them to fight by your side. And the Scholar has a fairy, which is associated with the Wanderer's Palace dungeon. And the fairy assists you in your healing job, which is what basically a Scholar does. You go from being a DPS to a healer, and it can be a rather striking change for a lot of players, and Scholar is a very complex job. So is Summoner. But Scholar is probably even more complex because of all the abilities that is available to it. Now, Square Enix is abandoning classes. They're not getting rid of them. They're not taking them out of the game, but they're no longer going to be adding new classes to the game. Only jobs. And so the Heavensward expansion added 3 new jobs to the game. These jobs being the machinist, which is a ranged DPS using guns, which also has turrets with different abilities. The Astrologian, which is a magic ranged healer. And the Dark Knight, which is a tank. Now, in Final Fantasy XI, Dark Knight was a DPS. In Final Fantasy XIV, Dark Knight's a tank. So it's an interesting choice and combination. Those become available at level 30 for your character, and you also have to have the Heavensward storyline unlocked, which means you have to have a job at least level 50, and you have to have completed the Steps of Faith quest line in order to get to the 4th and final city-state of Eorzea. The ancient and proud nation of Ishgard has been at war with dragons for over 1,000 years. This war has been all-encompassing. It has become a part of their very culture, and it's become the foundation for their religion. A lot has been happening in Ishgard since the end of the war. And in order to get to the classes, or jobs that are here, you must begin the Heavensward storyline, which gets you involved in what's been going on here in Ishgard, and gets you involved in the war with the dragons, the Dravanians. Ishgard, much like Udal, has a similar problem with class. You have the rich upper crust, you have the royals, and you have the poor, and the disparity between the two. You also have a problem of religious fundamentalists, religious zealots. Now, you cannot choose Ishgard as a nation to start in, unfortunately, unlike the other city-states. This one you'll come to eventually as you're playing the game, and this is the first of the major expansions for Final Fantasy XIV. There is another one coming, Stormblood, which will take us into Alamiga, and finally begin to deal with what's going on there. So why should you play Final Fantasy XIV, even though it is a pay-to-play MMO? Well, there are several reasons. How many MMORPGs let you play every single class in the game with one character? You can play everything. Everything. Now here, you'll find something interesting. I did not speak of these before. These are additional crafting classes. You have the Discipline of the Hand and Discipline of the Land. The Discipline of the Hand are the crafters. Your carpenter, your blacksmith, armorer, goldsmith, leather worker, weaver, alchemist, and culinarian, which is your chef, basically. And these classes have abilities that are specific for crafting items within these disciplines. participant of the land, your miner, botanist, and fisher are gathering classes. You mine up materials, you harvest materials from plants, and you fish for fish in the ocean. And you can seamlessly switch between them. Let me show you. All on one character. There's no having to create one character, then create another one for a different class and job. You can play all of them off of one character. All of them. Another reason why you might want to play Final Fantasy XIV is that even though it is available for PC and PlayStation 4, both can actually play together in the same game. It's unlike other games like like Elder Scrolls Online, where the PC and console gamers are isolated from one another on the servers. Here, if you are, whether you're PC or console player, you can play on the exact same servers. You're not isolated from one another. So if you have friends who play this game on PC, get the PS4 version if you don't have a computer, and play with them on their server. You can do that. And then you can use like a cell phone or whatever to use whatever voice software you choose to communicate with. Mumble, TeamSpeak, Discord, whichever you choose. Another reason is Final Fantasy XIV has a great community. Every MMORPG has its jerks, its assholes, but overall the community of Final Fantasy XIV is actually fairly nice. A lot nicer than what you would find in WoW or most other free-to-play games. And there's content. Loads of content in this game. You will have a hard time finding nothing to do. And not only can you craft, and there's a plethora of dungeons to go through. There's a lot of side quests. And then there is one last thing. Now, in addition to the plethora of dungeons that are in the game, you will also encounter this place, Palace of the Dead. Now, the Palace of the Dead is a gauntlet. It goes from level 1 to 200. And it plays like a classic Final Fantasy game. The screens you'll find are classic screens, like this. And you have save slots for going in there. Every time you go in, the floor plan for each of the levels... Every time you go in, the floor plans for each of the levels is completely random. And the items you will find down there are completely random. It does not matter what your level is, doesn't matter what your job is, or what your class is. You can go down there at level 1 if you want to. As long as you unlock the quest here to be able to go down into the Palace of the Dead and do it. Because as you as you go down, you'll gain experience and level up, and you'll reach level 60 eventually, and you have all your skills and abilities of a level 60 class available. Now, in order to use your job abilities, of course, you have to unlock your job, then come back and go down there. You can only do like 1 to 50 with a class. You would need your job abilities from 50 on down. And it gets progressively tougher, progressively harder. The areas begin to change as you go down further and further. And different music from the game plays in the background in each section randomly. And one of the main differences with 100 to 200 is you can only go down with a fixed party. You can't go down with, say, just anybody randomly. You have to choose a fixed party. You have to have people that will go down there with you consistently. You go 10 levels, fight a boss. 10 levels, fight a boss. And it gets really tough, especially those last 50. That it get incredibly hard. And from what I know, only a few people have actually made it to floor 200. And it's hard. Incredibly hard. And some insane stuff can happen down there. You think everything's nice and fine and calm, and then all of a sudden all hell breaks loose. It's unpredictable what can happen in Palace of the Dead. And there's an interesting quest line and story to it as well. Now, that's not all that there is to Final Fantasy XIV. I mean, there's way more to it than what I could tell you in this video alone. I could do an entire series of videos on all the stuff that's possible in this game. All the stuff that you can do. So I encourage you to give the game a try. There is a free trial that you can try out. So if you want to actually download the game and give it a try for a while, there is a free trial period. I encourage you, give this game a try. I mean, you aren't losing anything just by doing it. And if you have friends who play it, you can play alongside them even if you don't own a PC. If you own a PlayStation 4, you can play with your friends. And it does run great on PC. As you can see, I'm running with DirectX 11, with DirectX 11 effects such as God rays and better lighting. If you have a PC that's not quite as powerful, you can run in DirectX 9 mode just fine. This game is not that taxing on system requirements. That is going to change a little bit with Stormblood. With that expansion, they're going to raise the system requirements slightly, because that game's only going to have DirectX 11. That is only going to have a DirectX 11 mode. So you might need a slightly more powerful system, but most of your average mid-range gaming PCs right now can handle this game without a problem. And there's no reason why your average $600 gaming PC couldn't get 60 frames per second at 1080p with this game in DirectX 11. No reason whatsoever why you would get poor performance. So, this has been Final Fantasy XIV. Again, I encourage you to try it out. So, I've been Mike, and I will see you next time.